Hey, this is Jacob, and in this video, I'm going to be going over 5 myths about Esperanto. Just to provide a little intro about myself, my name is Jacob Laguerre. I was born and raised in New York, and I currently still live in New York. I've been studying Esperanto since 2023, and I am an aspiring polyglot. I am a native English speaker, obviously, and also I'm learning Spanish, French, as well as Esperanto, of course. And I'm also really like a huge fan of anime. I do want to learn Japanese at some point, but yeah, I'm kind of saving that for a little bit later while I try to master Spanish, French, and Esperanto. But that's just a quick intro about myself. Now, the reason I wanted to make this video is because I've been learning Esperanto for a little while, and I think it's a really great language to learn. But I noticed though that some people, when they look at Esperanto, they seem to have some incorrect ideas about it. And I wanted to create this video as a way to just kind of clear the air a bit and just give people a much better idea and better understanding of what Esperanto is about. So there's going to be 5 myths we're going to be going over. The first one being Esperanto only has 15 rules. Esperanto is an easy language. Esperanto is not a real language. Esperanto has no culture, as well as nobody speaks Esperanto. So we're going to be going over this one at a time. And yeah, let's hop into this. So on the first myth being that Esperanto only has 16 rules. And what you're going to notice here that each one of these myths that I'm going to be addressing, there is going to be like a grain of truth to each one of them. So I don't want to be bashing people that have these ideas or maybe even are spreading these ideas as well, because I've kind of had these ideas to one extent or another as well. But once I became more immersed into the culture and just understanding Esperanto better, I realized that when it comes to these things, they're a little bit inaccurate. So like I said, this isn't to like bash anybody, but just to hopefully just clear the air a bit. So this whole idea that Esperanto only has 16 rules. Now there is some truth to this because Esperanto does have 16 base rules that it is based upon. But in addition to those rules, there are also a bunch of little like rules and grammar things that you need to be aware of when you're using Esperanto. And the 16 basic rules, I made a type here with 15, but it's supposed to say 16. The 16 basic rules, while it does lay the foundation for Esperanto, there is a lot more to it as far as being able to speak Esperanto at a proficient level. And it's not going to count for every single situation. And also worth mentioning as well when it comes to Esperanto, although Esperanto is definitely a lot more regular compared to like a natural language, like English or Spanish or whatever. There are some minor exceptions here and there that you have to be aware of as well. I'm not really going to go too much into the weeds as far as this video, but more so just to give you a general idea that as you're learning Esperanto, you're going to notice some things that aren't like 100% logical. And I think this is just really comes down to language in and of itself. Language is not generally a logical thing, but of course there are degrees of logic as far as like what makes sense and what doesn't really make a lot of sense. But the fact that Esperanto was designed from the ground up to be a language that was easy to pick up and for people to learn, there's a lot more regularity and consistency to it compared to like a natural language, like a language that develops naturally over time. But something you should be aware of is that there are going to be some minor exceptions here and there, and you don't want to let that like kind of catch you off guard, so to speak. So just something that you want to be aware of moving forward. But overall, like you shouldn't let that like scare you or intimidate you or anything like that. You can still like pick up the language as long as you're putting in the work and you're putting in the effort. You're going to be able to become more familiar with how the rules work when you got to apply those exceptions and so on. Like it's with anything. You just put in the effort, and eventually, you're going to reap the benefits. Now, next, so moving on to the second myth about Esperanto. Now, there's this idea that, and I've been a little bit guilty of myself by saying that Esperanto is an easy language. Now, it is generally true that Esperanto is a lot easier to learn compared to other languages, but it is going to have its challenges as well. Like I'm going through challenges myself. Like right now, I'm focusing on learning how to speak Esperanto so I can like speak fluently. Like I'm pretty good when it comes to like writing Esperanto and reading and listening, but actually like making the words come out of my mouth and being able to speak with someone in real time, that's is still a bit challenging for me right now, and that's something that I'm working on. So I mean, even though like I know the challenges that I'm facing with Esperanto would be a lot less compared to like learning Spanish or French, there are going to be some challenges as well. But like again, you shouldn't like let that discourage you or like scare you away from Esperanto. Like the challenges that you're going to deal with Esperanto are going to be much milder compared to any other language that you're going to going to try to learn. So don't let that scare you. Like it's still much easier to learn, but if you do go and you start running into like challenges here and there when it comes to learning Esperanto, like don't let that like discourage you or just make you feel bad or anything. Like everybody goes through challenges. Like some people they struggle with some things or other things or whatever. So you just have to like be able to work through them and just take your time and be patient. Like learning, like when you speak your native language, you've been speaking that your entire life. Like for me, I've been speaking English my entire life. So when it comes to like learning a new language, I shouldn't hold that new language to the same standard that I hold like my native language. You have to understand that you're going to require some time and some effort to like build those neurological pathways and get yourself to the point where you can communicate, freely and fluidly. So, it's just going to take some time, and just understand that while it is easier compared to like other languages, I mean, calling it like an easy language objectively, can be a little bit excuse me, a little bit misleading. So that's that. The next myth is some people think that Esperanto isn't a real language, and part of the reason people think that is because Esperanto was created by one person, and they went and they intentionally made this language like it's artificial. Excuse me, it's artificial, so to speak. So now, while it is true that Esperanto was created by one person, Dr. L. Zamenhof, you have to realize that Esperanto isn't the same language now that it was back like when it was created. Like Esperanto went through a ton of different evolutions, a ton of changes, new words being added, old words not being used as much, and meanings like changing and like senses changing. So there's been so much changing and evolution that's happened with Esperanto naturally that it's very much like a very alive language. So to say that Esperanto isn't a real language just because one person like created the language, that's to me is just it's not accurate, because like the language has changed and it has evolved like significantly. In fact, the language continues to change and evolve. Like the way that we use the language now is very different than the way that we used the language back then. And I'm sure like in another 30, 40, 50 years or what have you, the language will be even more different. New concepts will be added, old concepts will be taken away, meanings of words may change, and this happens with any language what that you could speak, like English, Spanish, French. Like languages are constantly evolving. Like as long as people are using that language on a consistent basis, like it's going to change and it's going to evolve. Like that's just what happens. And just to address this last point that I have on the slide here, like all languages are fundamentally made up. This is something that I feel like a lot of people don't appreciate, because like every language is just a bunch of random sounds that we're able to like make sense out of. Like Esperanto was just happened to be created by one person, but all other languages, it was more just like a collective effort, like people were like grunting and making noises, and overall those noises became more refined, and then they had like structure. And then before you know it, you got languages like English, Spanish, French that have hundreds of years of history, and all this evolution, all this changes, like all of it is made up at the end of the day. So to say that Esperanto isn't real because like it was just one guy that did it, I mean that to me is just some inconsistent logic. So that's my thoughts on that. Moving on to the next myth, Esperanto has no culture. Now, this is a very interesting one because, like, on the surface, this almost seems like it makes sense because, this is just a language that, well, at least the idea behind Esperanto is that it was supposed to be an international auxiliary language where people can go and use learn this language in addition to the native language. So when you want to speak across borders, speak to people from different countries, they're able to go and just speak with that person. So you might wonder to yourself, like, where does like culture fit into that? Well, it turns out like culture has a lot to do with Esperanto. I kind of think that if you have a group of people that come together that come for one particular purpose, like with Esperanto, the whole idea for it to be a international language that people from all around the world could speak, like there's going to be culture just naturally going to evolve, and it has like a ton of culture. I think one of the biggest things to show that Esperanto has a certain level of culture is the fact that there exists native speakers of Esperanto. So there are people that were raised and learned Esperanto in the home. Usually, in most cases, when they learn Esperanto, they learn it in addition to another language. So they usually grow up like bilingual or something like that. But generally speaking, like native speakers, like they learn this language from their home, and they are able to speak this language. It's their home language, so to speak. Another big part about Esperanto culture is the whole writing and the reading aspect of it. You see, for a large part of Esperanto's history, the only way that you could learn Esperanto is by like reading a book, or like yeah, basically like reading a book. Like you had to like read about it to like figure out like how to speak this language. And also like the whole idea behind Esperanto is to connect people from all over the world. So there'll be like pen pals and stuff where people will go and they will just write to each other back and forth, sending mail. And even now today, like Esperanto still has a big reading and writing culture to it. Like there are a bunch of big communities that exist online right now where people go and they talk to each other and they exchange messages. Like they have there's another thing that's cool too about Esperanto where they have like a postcard exchange where you can go, you could write, excuse me, you could write a postcard in Esperanto, you could send it out to someone, or somebody could send you a postcard in Esperanto, which is another part of its culture. Another thing too, like there are a bunch of events, like a bunch of like not only like online events, but also like in-person events as well. The biggest in-person event is called the World Esperanto Congress, where it can draw anywhere from like around say like 1,500 all the way to like 3,000 people, depending on the location. Usually, when the Esperanto Congress is hosted somewhere like in Europe, like Central Europe or somewhere around that area, those usually tend to draw in a lot more people. So the events that occur, like the big events, as well as just like smaller and more local events, this is another huge part of Esperanto. And believe it or not, there are over 25,000 books in Esperanto. Now, these 25,000 books is a combination of books that were originally written, as well as like translated books as well. But books is just another huge aspect about Esperanto as well. And like this, a very robust literature. New books are being published all the time. Yeah, I might even publish a book myself. You never know. So like I said, all of these things and a lot more, definitely plays into the culture of Esperanto. So to say that Esperanto has no culture to me just doesn't make any sense. So moving on to myth number 5. Now I've already kind of answered this like in when going over the previous myths, but I do think this one point is worth mentioning. This whole idea that nobody speaks Esperanto. Now sure, now if you were to compare like Esperanto to a language like say like English, where it's like hundreds of millions of speakers, or like Mandarin, where there's like over a billion speakers of Mandarin itself. Yeah, when you compare it to like those types of languages, then it seems like practically nobody speaks it. But based on the estimates or the numbers that are available online, there seems to be like roughly like around 100,000 speakers. Like I've heard some people say that there's as many as 2 million speakers, but I think 100,000 is like it's a pretty decent number. It's a pretty conservative estimate. And another thing too, like Esperanto is confirmed to be the most successful constructed language in the world, which obviously there's been a ton of constructed languages that exist besides Esperanto. In fact, there are languages that are based on Esperanto itself. Like there's a language called Edo, as well as other languages where it kind of became like an offshoot of Esperanto, but none of those languages have ever had the same level of success that Esperanto that has had. So you can definitely rest assured that there are many speakers. And like I was saying before, like when talking about the previous myths, like people gather around every day, every month, speaking in Esperanto, people chat in Esperanto, people have meetings in Esperanto, like people speak this language on a fairly consistent basis, basically every day, if not every day, like every week, every month. So there are most certainly like speakers. They may not have as many speakers compared to like other languages, but this whole idea that Esperanto has like nobody speaks is, I mean, that is such a that is so inaccurate. I mean, it's not even funny. So, anyways, yeah, that is what I have all for you today. Like if any of these myths surprise you, or if you learn anything new, definitely feel free to leave a comment below. Or if you know any other myths that I may not have covered among these five, definitely feel free to comment that as well. I mean, definitely would love to read it. I may even respond. But yeah, so if you enjoy videos like this where I talk about language learning and how to become an aspiring polyglot like me, definitely all you gotta do is just hit that subscribe button down below, tap the bell icon. That way you'll be notified as soon as I release new videos. This is Jacob Laguerre. I'm signing off, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.